In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up Jenkins using Docker. The prerequisite for this is you should have Docker installed. I'm not going to cover this as part of this video because I assume the Docker has been installed. I have an environment set up on a local, or a remote Linux server. I'm just validating my Docker installation using Docker version. If I see Docker client and server, that means my Docker has been configured properly. If you don't see the server component, make sure you have that running and configured before you proceed. And this is how you can launch Jenkins. It's extremely easy, especially with Docker. Since you're using Docker, you wouldn't have to worry about how to install, how to set up, how to configure, what operating system is needed, what are the instructions to install Jenkins. All of that is taken care by Docker, and you just run a command like this where you say docker run -idt -name, provide a name for that container, that is Jenkins. It is going to pull the image. That's what it is doing right now, and it is going to start the service automatically, writer, and it is going to start listening on port 8080 that's been provided as part of that command. So once this is done, we can access Jenkins UI using the host IP and the port number. This creates a host port mapping. So based on your setup, so I see that Jenkins is running, I run docker ps and I see that is running, and it's been mapped to port 8080. So based on your installation, I have it running on a Linux server remotely, so I'm going to pick the IP of that. If you're running Docker locally, either using Docker for Mac or Docker for Windows, you might want to use localhost or the local IP. And there you see that Jenkins has been set up, and this is the easiest way to set up Jenkins, that is using Docker. So learning Docker is worth the efforts if you want to set up and install and configure anything this quickly. Now when you set up Jenkins, it creates a password, and that password is sent to either that file or there is a log for Jenkins. And if you want to check the logs, again, we have set it up with Docker, so I'm just going to run docker logs Jenkins, and I see the logs for Jenkins in this long list of log lines. I see the starred asterisk lines, and between that I have the key, and that is the password for Jenkins, and that is the key that I'm going to use. And this key has been added to this file as well, so I can actually concatenate that file as well to get the contents of the Jenkins credentials, that is. So I'm going to use docker exec command. So I'm showing you both. Easiest is the log one, but you can also run a command using exec, cat that file, and it's the same string, same credentials. Once you have those credentials set up, you can just add those, and there you would see the configuration page for Jenkins, mainly the plugin installation page. You have two options: either you can install suggested plugins automatically, or second option is where you can select plugins manually. You can select from the list. I've chosen the second option. I see a bunch of plugins on the left hand side. I see categories of plugins. Some of the useful plugins are given here. You can always select the plugins later and install it as well. That's what I'm going to do. So instead of, I'm just browsing through those list of plugins and showing you some of those. For example, for source code management, you have Git, and then there are various other plugins. I'm just going to select none. I don't want any plugins to be installed right now. I'll configure it later. For now, I am just going to add my first user. This is my first admin user. This will be an admin user. So go ahead, create a login. And once I do that, I'm going to click on save and finish. That's it. And my Jenkins is ready. If I click on start using Jenkins, it takes me to this page. This is the Jenkins UI. And let me introduce you to this UI first. And on the left hand side, you see a bunch of icons. You also have a logo of Jenkins there. Underneath that, you have some drop down menu. So this drop down menu is similar to what you see on that left hand side menu. This is just a detailed menu of that. And here you see new item, people. You can find the build history. You can configure Jenkins from here. You can look at the views configured as well. You can create new jobs, projects from either of these options, new item or create new jobs. On top right corner is where you see the user configure, user that you are logged in with, and anything related to that user. This is when Jenkins was installed and created. The Jenkins version that I have is 2.60.3. If you want the same version, use the same image that I have launched it with, that is School of Devops /Jenkins. That's the Docker image. This is the build history. Right now it's empty, and you can look at the views from here. You can go back and actually start managing Jenkins from the manage Jenkins menu. This is the most important menu, and I'm going to start navigating this menu and show you some configurations related to that in the next video.